the orthodoxy, the controlling part of society that says, actually, no, you shan't do that because, well, you'll be less productive. And the pushback comes with lots of words, and some of them are true and some of them is just a cover story. But, you'll be more productive if you don't do that. We're going to restrict that just to say carnival. But really it's about control. And people experiencing ecstasis, experiencing these kinds of, hyperconscious, perhaps entheogen, inflamed states are hard to control. They're hard to predict, and it's hard to know what they're going to do next and what they're going to think next too.
Well, it's a high noise, high creativity state. Yes. And the point, noise isn't good. Noise, in this case, I'm talking about statistical noise. And I guess the short version of this would be, in a complex system, there are a huge number of influences. And you may be interested in one particular parameter, and everything else that affects it is noise with respect to the change in that one parameter. So there's lots of noise in the cognition that comes along with things like entheogens. And that is not a positive thing, but it is part and parcel of the process that generates creativity. In other words, if your thinking day to day is high quality, it is also limited. In order to be high quality and low noise, it has to bar possibilities that could be but aren't worth investigation. And so in one sense, it's like cognitive carnival, right? You take some period of time and you choose to reverse the normal priority. The normal priority is in perceiving the world accurately and behaving reasonably with respect to it. What if you suspend those rules for a day and you say, actually, I'd prefer to tune into things that ordinarily I would dismiss because some small fraction of them are actually useful and I can't see them because my highly functioning mind blocks them from me.
Tune in, explore, cross boundaries, know that those kinds of explorations, within reason, will be forgiven later.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah, so that's the thing, is you don't want to assume that it's insight because most of it's nonsense.
Right.
But
nor can you. If you have murderous instincts, you're not allowed to act on those. Like, there will be repercussions. If you have rapey instincts, no, right? But so there are still. It's a matter of pushing boundaries and seeing where the boundaries could be sometimes, but are still within the realm that we can all get along with one another.
Yeah, or I would say, if you're the kind of person who doesn't have those things sufficiently locked down that you can't be sure they will not rear their ugly head, then that's not an experiment for you.
Right.
But if you are the kind of person who can handle relaxing the mental controls that usually keep madness at bay, and you can say, well, I would like to try madness for a brief period of time and see if anything comes of it, then it is an experiment with Turing. And I would also, this may seem like a weird segue. It's a segue certainly to an earlier chapter in the book, but we are faced with very difficult challenges. We ultramoderns, right? Hyper novelty has thrown us, for example, a puzzle about what to do with the relationships between the sexes, how to build a relationship when the stuff that used to make relationships coherent and necessary has evaporated, and how do you bootstrap the new version of this? And one thing that's true is, when you are trying to solve a problem that is outside the range of the toolkit you've got, you have no choice but to engage a higher mode of creativity, right? Some way or other, you're going to have to experiment beyond the comfortable. And one way that is available is certainly I like better and better Huxley's idea of the doors of perception, because maybe doors is a little too binary, but the idea that one can actually adjust the permeability of consciousness in order to see whether there are tools that are nearby but not immediately available to the normally regulated conscious mind, that's as useful in the context of relationships as anywhere else, maybe even more useful. And the risk of saying too much, you and I had plenty of formative experiences together. And, how powerful is that to be able to, step out of the normal world together with somebody and explore? It's really an amazing tool.
No, it's completely extraordinary. And so one of the corrective lens items from this chapter is consider engaging with psychedelics carefully. If there is anything in you that is curious, they are now legal in some places, but consider engaging them as the powerful cognitive tools that they are, not as a form of recreation. That doesn't mean you can't have fun. And certainly, we've had a lot of fun with them, and we've had some times that were not fun, and they were some more formative than others, but they were all impactful in a way that is impossible to describe. It's maybe a little bit analogous to the idea of trying to tell someone what parenthood is like if you don't have children. Like, oh, it's a different kind of love. Well, that falls flat. Everyone knows that doesn't communicate, that doesn't convey it, and yet it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like the parent's love for a child is unlike anything else. And, an experience with exogenous hallucinogens or entheogens that are strong enough that you really do have something, the language used is ego death, and I'm not sure I totally like that language, but something strong enough such that you lose your desire to control your situation, or you lose, you know that you've just lost the ability to do so, and so you just are there, is extraordinary with regard to opening up, as you say, the doors, the doors of perception. And I will say, I don't know that I have a particular excerpt to share, but just another book, and we'll put these in the show notes as well. This book on drugs. This book is on drugs. And I think that's just it. There's no subtitle, by David Lenson. It's old at this point. It's from 1995, which is, it's fascinating to read a book that is so current and so modern, that exists practically before the internet. It's not before the internet, but certainly before social media, before even, 1998, before the .com bubble. But his descriptions, he explores just so much of what it is, what drugs are, what they do, how drugs are described in society by the orthodoxy as an uncivilizing influence, especially on children. And he specifically, if memory serves, talks about differences between what he calls drugs of desire, cocaine, crack, speed, and drugs of pleasure, which is a strange word, but by which he is including marijuana and psychedelics. And the first category being sort of short-term, pretty uninteresting, and pretty much not valuable. And yeah. I'm editorializing here, but if memory serves, it's been a while since I read this. That's his conclusion as well. Whereas the latter ones allow for an opening of the doors of perception, that you can get other ways, right? Like people can get through extreme sport, through some kinds of sexual engagement, through meditation, through long, periods alone without talking to anyone. Like
sweat lodge.
And, so a lot of the things that are rituals from other societies also do involve, though, some additional exogenous molecule that you're smoking or imbibing or whatever it is.
Right. I mean, in some sense, it's all endogenous. You're triggering circuits that are there, right, and you're triggering them in some way that's novel enough that your conscious mind gets to tune in on it, or however it works. But right. But the real point is it's all trade-offs, right? It's not like that state doesn't come with downside. In fact, that state is mostly downside. You couldn't run your life that way. But borrowing from it a little, diminishing returns being what they are you better off living your entire life this side of that boundary, or would, a tiny periodic adventure across that boundary be worth a tremendous amount in terms of what you got to understand about even what your own mind, one of the things, these sort of inadvertent lessons that I got from it is how little direct perception is really just you seeing the outside world. It's color by numbers, and it's done very, very well so that you do get a real sense of where the objects are and what they're made of and all of that, right? But, the simple fact of what happens when you look in a mirror, right, tells you that it's not just a report of where the photons are going. It's an interpolation.
Right.
And
no, and it brings some of your has the potential to bring some of the disparate parts of you into sort of awareness of one another, such that you can become more lighthearted about your own self and like observe yourself with more mirth at some level. I remember an experience of knowing very well that it was not incumbent upon me to stand in a particular way to hold up the building that I was leaning up against, but I had the very distinct sense, and in fact, someone walked past me. I was like, I'm holding up this building.
You're welcome.
Like, you're welcome. You're safe. Knowing that that's patently untrue. There's no way that this building that existed before I ever showed up and would continue to exist after I left was in need of me leaning up against it the way I was. But something in my subjective experience, as helped by, in that case, ayahuasca, led me to believe, even though I knew logically it couldn't be the case, that I was necessary there at that moment. And what's the lesson there? I don't know. Are there lessons to be had that are explicit or that can become conscious and then usable from any one of these stories? Probably not. It's a little bit like sharing dreams. Like, probably mostly the particular instances from particular trips are just going to seem, they're going to fall flat for people. But the fact is that you can learn from the tensions that are revealed.